This is Red Herring Reviews, and I'm Jonathan. I'm going to be doing a continuation of my Solo, a Star Wars story review. This time I'll pretty much just give you everything. I'll talk about some plot points, and I'm basically going to be spoiling the movie. So if you have not seen the movie, I advise you to click on the link down below and see my spoiler-free review. Yeah, I actually really liked this movie. There really wasn't a whole lot of stuff in the movie that I left the theater thinking, oh man, I hated that, or I really just wish that they had done that differently. And when I left the theater, I was pretty impressed. All right, so I'll get into the positives. It was just a fun movie. It was entertaining. It was beautifully shot. Like, there were some scenes, and the cinematography on some scenes was like, felt like a Western, a heist film, you know. There was a couple scenes that I can remember, you know, where they would like get like an extreme close-up on Han's eyes, you know, as he was doing something, or the scene you've seen from the trailer where you know, Han is like squaring off with the villain Enfys Nest, or the villain Enfys Nest. We find out later that's a sort of a plot twist. She's not actually a villain. And then the action sequences were just like, they were top notch. They make the Kessel Run. Finally, you get to see that in like a real, you know, they talk about it in all the other movies, and now we actually get to see it. The acting was great. Alden Ehrenreich, he did amazing as Han Solo. You know, actually there's room for improvement, but no one's going to top Harrison Ford. So just literally get that out of your mind, because if you go in trying to compare him to Harrison Ford, he's always going to come up short. So you just have to like suspend disbelief, you know, and just say, hey, this is a young Han Solo, and just let Alden Ehrenreich be him, you know. And I thought he did a great job. Donald Glover did amazing as Lando. Like when he first got cast as a young Lando, when they made that casting announcement, I was like, man, that is the perfect decision that they could have made. Like not only does he look like Lando / Billy D. Williams, you know, he's just a cool character, and so like I just felt like he'd just be a natural in that role, and he was. And Emilia Clarke, I was a little nervous about her just because I mean, I love Game of Thrones, and I've seen another movie that she was in, and in Game of Thrones, you know, she's Khaleesi. She is the mother of dragons, you know, the breaker of chains. You know, she's a very stoic character, and some people say that she can't act too, you know, great. She just kind of does this one, you know, like just how she is in the show. She just does that, and so people say her range isn't very good. So the other movie I saw her in, I can't remember the name of it right now. I'll probably put a link right here to the picture. She played a very quirky, very odd, funny, just weird sort of person, which I think when you see interviews with Emilia Clarke, she's constantly smiling and just kind of a goober a little bit, you know. And so I think in that movie, she's essentially playing herself, so that was probably easy to do. And in this movie, I was just a little nervous because I was like, okay, well, she seems to be like playing a different type of character, and she does a really good job. And because the character is like really mysterious, and you know, she's Han's love interest. You find out early on in the film they get separated, and then later they get back together through the course of, you know, some events, and then they have to end up going on this mission together. But she's hiding something, you know. There's just something that you know she's hiding, and you're not sure what it is, but at the same time it's like, oh, you know, Han's like, I don't care, you know, we're together, and they're like, once we're done with this, we're gonna like fly off and be together. That's Han's mentality. And so anyway, but she just plays this part really well. We're like hiding this mystery, and then we find out that she's actually with the main villain, which is Paul Bettany's character, and he was fine. I mean, I love Paul Bettany. He's amazing. He plays a character called Dryden Voss, and he's portrayed as like sort of the main antagonist of this particular movie. I mean, I guess you could say that he just plays like the evil character that says, oh, if you disappoint me, you're dead, and if you don't complete this mission, I will kill you. So like, you know, he is the antagonist for that role, and he does a good job of sort of like, he's just suave, smooth, like he acts like he really likes you, but then if you make him angry, you know, you're dead. And so they portrayed that pretty well, but I guess they could have added a little more depth to his character, but I guess maybe you don't really need it for this movie. But if there were some complaints, like there was room that you could complain about him as the villain not being like a strong villain. But the story's not about him. It's not about a villain of the story. It's about Han Solo. The name of the movie is Solo. The story is about how Han becomes a smuggler, how Han meets Chewbacca, how he meets Lando. Then by the end of the movie, you're like, okay, how does he become the Harrison Ford Han Solo that we know in A New Hope, Episode 4. And I don't think this movie actually lands on that moment where it's like, okay, this is now the Han Solo from Episode 4. And of course, this movie ends leaving you on a cliffhanger, which I'll go ahead and just say it now. Like, so the big spoiler for this movie is that at the very end of the movie, there's like, and I guess this is also like, could be a negative, but it's just kind of like wonky, I think, the way it works out. But like, there's this sort of this big, there's like a bunch of plot twists all crammed right there at the end of the movie. But still, it wasn't like enough to make me think, oh, this is really stupid, or this is unbelievable, or this is dumb. But anyway, so all that to set up like what the biggest spoiler for this movie is, and what they've been hiding since the beginning of production, is that, you know, once Han leaves and Kira takes sort of this ring that Dryden Voss has, which throughout the whole movie they reference the fact that Dryden Voss actually works for someone else, and you don't know who it is, except they mention the name of this, you know, they call it Crimson Dawn, so you assume that it's this company that even Dryden Voss works for. And so anyway, so she takes the ring, and then she goes over to this little console and puts the ring on there, and then of course a hologram pulls up, and there's a hooded hologram character. You know, you're not sure who it is, and then of course like the hood slowly gets revealed, and there it is, the red stripes, the black, the horns, you know, it's freaking Darth Maul, you know, sitting there. And, you know, the same Darth Maul that got, you know, sliced in half in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Yeah, he's back, and if you are a casual moviegoer, meaning like you may be a huge Star Wars fan, but all you do is watch the movies, you may be thinking, wait a minute, how is Darth Maul alive? Like, he literally was cut in half. How did he survive that? Or like, did he get resurrected? Like, you just don't know. But then, you know, anybody who's watched the Clone Wars, or I guess Star Wars Clone Wars, the TV show, you learn, you know, that how Darth Maul survived, and that he actually has a huge story arc within that, you know, animated series. It's on Netflix, so if you're interested, you should go watch, or just go online and figure out how did Darth Maul survive. There's some really good YouTube videos, which I may post in the link, that just sort of, or down in the description, that sort of explain, so you don't have to go and watch every episode of Clone Wars just to find out how Darth Maul survived. But anyways, yeah, that was a pretty cool moment, and you know, like, so then of course, like, just to solidify, because he is older, and of course he has the robotic legs, which, you know, are explained in the Clone Wars series. He uses the Force and pulls his lightsaber, and then ignites his double-bladed lightsaber. And then, in case you needed even more proof that it's Darth Maul, the Duel of the Fates is just like playing the, you know, the music playing in the background. Anyway, so that was amazing. I thought that was really cool, and it kind of ends. Well, it doesn't. The movie doesn't end there, but like, Kira's story ends there, because they're talking, and then he says, meet me on Dathomir, which is where Darth Maul is from. And again, the Clone Wars goes into more detail, and the comics sort of go into detail about, you know, about that planet. But anyway, so that's where I'm saying that this movie is pretty wide open to possibly exploring more of what Kira is going to be doing with Darth Maul and Crimson Dawn, which I'm pretty excited about. Like, I hope they actually make more movies and explain that storyline more. Then later, once Han goes back and meets Beckett, they have this conversation where they're like, yeah, you know, kid, I really like you and stuff. And before all that even went down, you know, Beckett said, yeah, I'm done with all this, and, you know, I heard about a gangster on Tatooine, and I'm about to go join his crew and try to do one last job. A reference to Jabba the Hutt. They bring that back whenever they're at the end there, and there's this moment where they just, you know, Beckett and Han are like, look, I can't let you take that stuff. I got to give it to Enfys Nest, who, like, I'm not really about the cause that they're for, but I can't let you take this. And so there's this moment where it's kind of like they're eyeballing each other, and then Beckett has this little speech where he's just going to be like, you know, I was telling you this, and you can see Beckett sort of reach for his gun, and then before he even, like, he doesn't even finish his speech, all of a sudden you hear a blaster shot, and Beckett sort of reacts. And then he kind of like starts falling to the ground, and then Han runs to him. And then, of course, you realize that Han shot him. This was a cool throwback to any of the nerds who really care. This is a pretty clear, direct moment where I think the screenwriters were like, okay, Han shot first. And so like they were like, okay, he is the type of guy who would shoot first. Because then Han mentions to Chewie again, Beckett had mentioned the gangster on Tatooine, and that they thought about joining up with that crew and see what's going on there. So like, that sort of also could lead you to believe that they're setting up a sequel, which I would like to see. I would actually like to see Han Solo joining Jabba and meeting up with some of the other bounty hunters like Boba Fett. I think it would be cool to see. So they kind of set that up to where that could be a sequel. I would be down for that. The movie also had some really nice small references that I thought were pretty cool. There was one where Beckett was meeting Lando when they first met Lando for the first time. And Lando was like, "Oh, Beckett, you killed Aura Singh, right? I respect that. I owed her a lot of money." So that was pretty cool. It was like, if you haven't watched Clone Wars, then you probably don't know who Aura Singh is, but she was also in The Phantom Menace for like a very small second. Yeah, she was the girl there with the white skin and the red hair watching over the pod racing. Then there was another reference earlier in the movie where Val, who was Beckett's love interest, was not really pleased with Han and Chewie as new members of their team, and she was just like, "Oh, we should have got Bosk," and like, he's another big character in the Star Wars universe. He's the big lizard guy from Empire Strikes Back, and of course, again, he played a pretty substantial role in Clone Wars. There was a smaller reference very early in the movie when Han was at that Imperial checkpoint station, and like whenever he was going to go join the Empire, there was a little TV screen that was showing like "Join the Empire today," and like you could hear the Imperial march music, the dun 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 dun. But that song is, music nerd, that song is in a minor key, which kind of has more of a sad, emotional sound to it. But then in the video that they were playing as inspiration to join the Empire, they actually switched it to make it a major key, just so it sounded a little more positive. Which I just noticed it, and I thought it was kind of a cool little touch that, obviously they're promoting themselves as good. Then there was another scene where when they infiltrated the spice mines of Kessel, Beckett was actually wearing the skiff helmet that Lando wears in Return of the Jedi on Jabba's palace. When they were infiltrating Jabba's palace, he wore that little mask with the like horns and stuff on the face. And so I guess Lando's had that for a long time, and it was just cool to see Beckett wear that. Well, I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about this, and maybe I'm completely wrong in this, but if you guys remember from The Empire Strikes Back, Lando always calls Han, he calls him Han. He just always called him that in the original, movies, in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. He just always called him Han, and there was never any explanation to it.
So this is, Sabak? Sabak. Got it.
I would imagine Han mispronounced the name of the game intentionally, just to sort of mess with Lando just a little bit.
You played before?
A couple times, yeah. Can I ask you a question, Captain Calrissian?
Anything, Han?
It's Han, but that's okay.
It could be stretching it a little bit, but when I was watching it, I was like, "Oh, that's kind of funny." I just saw it as Lando sort of mocking him a little bit, because like, "Oh, you mispronounced this game? Okay, now I'm just gonna mispronounce your name," and he just called him that for, I guess, ever. I went into the movie with pretty low expectations, and just because I heard it was going to be like an okay movie, it wasn't going to be an amazing story, so I kind of went in with my expectations a lot lower than as if I was going in to see one of episode 9 or something, And anyway, so when I left the theater, I was like, wow, that was really good. And so after I did my spoiler-free review, I was like just fresh off the movie, and that's just how I felt. And I've had time to think about it, and I've heard some of the complaints that some people have had, and I get their points, even though I don't really feel that way. And so now I was going to talk about a few of those things. A lot of people just aren't really happy with the state that Lucasfilm is in right now, and a lot of that has to do with, well, what they say is Kathleen Kennedy. She's got some agenda that she's trying to like push into these movies, and she's like trying to basically just put a lot of politics into these movies that don't really need to be there. And so people, it was kind of weird because like when The Force Awakens came out, people didn't like the movie because they felt like it was just a rehashing of A New Hope, almost beat for beat, and story, like everything was the same. So they complained that it was too similar to the first one. Well, then The Last Jedi comes out, and it was completely different than any Star Wars movie had ever been. And then they were complaining because they ruined their childhood, and they did this and they did that. And I'll talk about that in a later video where I give you my opinions of The Last Jedi, because it pretty much divided the Star Wars community, if it wasn't already divided enough. And that's something, if you're not already a Star Wars fan, it's pretty ridiculous, in my opinion. That's just like, you just have such a wide range of what it means to be a Star Wars fan. You've got people that, well, it's more complicated than just two things, but you've got people that really, 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 really just treat Star Wars like it's a religion or it's a life, and they just like, this is this is reality. I've talked to some people where they actually believe in the Force. And then you have people that, just casually watch the movies and they're like, oh yeah, I love Star Wars. It's pretty cool, And then I say that I fall somewhere in that medium, like I really love Star Wars. I've loved it since I was a kid. And I love the movies and pretty much any media that I get my hands on that is Star Wars, whether it's even toys or video games or comic books or novels. I love the universe, and I love the characters in the universe, and where they take the story. Now, that's not to say that I can't be critical of the movies, and I mean there were things about there's things about every Star Wars movie that comes out that you can be critical of, or that I'm definitely critical of, but it doesn't affect the way I feel about the movies. Like the feeling that I have when I watch them is overall very positive, and some things you just have to kind of learn to look over. A couple months prior for Solo coming out, there was an issue to boycott from all these people that were just like, we hate the direction that Kathleen Kennedy is taking Star Wars in, so we're going to boycott this movie. Which, you're entitled to your opinion, and if that's how you feel like you can get your point across, that you would rather Star Wars go in a different direction, and that's how you feel you got to do it, so be it. But I do feel like that did have an effect on turnout for this movie, and just overall hype for this movie. All of these things, especially we just got The Last Jedi. It came out in December of 2017, and then now we're getting Solo, a Star Wars story, May, which just a few months away. Some people say that factored into the fact that it didn't do so well in the box office. Han actually gets his name, Solo. He's at the checkpoint for the Empire on Corellia at the very beginning of the movie when he's trying to escape and he's trying to join the Empire. And the person asks, what's your name? And he says, Han. He said, who are your people? Essentially, what is your surname? And he's like, well, I don't really have people. I'm just on my own. And then, of course, it's like the officer is just sort of like, oh. And it's almost like he looks at the camera and says, Solo. Han Solo. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay. It's a little bit on the nose, but literally when that happens, someone in the theater next to me, I just kind of heard a big, so it didn't really bother me that much. I mean, it was kind of I guess lazy writing, it just wasn't the most interesting way for him to have that name. Or other people have said that I don't need to know, he doesn't need to have a reason why his name is Solo. They just like the idea that his lifestyle reflects what his last name is. So I get that, I get the complaint, and I get the complaint, why would Han choose to keep that name if it was given to him by the Empire that he hates? So that was something I guess you could argue as a negative. Dryden Voss wasn't the most, it wasn't the best villain, I guess, for a particular movie. But like I said earlier, it's this is a movie about Solo, Han Solo. This is his story, and you don't necessarily need to have this villain. You need to have some reason and some stakes for the movie to make it okay, why are they doing what they're doing? But so anyways, I just felt like you didn't need to have some Thanos character, or some Joker, that's just oh, they're antagonizing me the whole entire movie. It's just nope, this is just a story about Solo meeting all these different characters. Probably one of the things that I didn't care for the most in the film was I was really annoyed by the L3 character, which was a droid. I mean, she was funny, but I feel like her ideology for droid equality, which I like the idea of it, it's okay, it's cool, a droid's fighting for equality, and but she was overzealous about it. But even though I found her annoying, they actually play that annoyance into the story, which, I mean, again, is a positive for me. She's always so, beating everybody over the head with this equal rights for the droids, and Lando is just kind of like, oh, you know, he's just kind of annoyed by it. So the fact that they play into that annoyance is pretty cool. So yeah, another scene that I really enjoyed, but had like a little thing that I wasn't too fond of, was when Han actually meets Chewie, and the way they do it is just sort of your typical Star Wars, you know, feed him to the beast moment, which, I mean, they say that Han gets thrown into this pit, and they say, oh, let's let the beast take care of him, and he hasn't eaten in so long, so he should be extra hungry. And, you know, they do the slow reveal, and like the growling in the distance and the feet and walking through the mud. And all of a sudden it reveals Chewbacca. And of course, Han's never met Chewbacca. And so, like, he's pretty terrifying looking. He's got mud covered all over him. But there ends up being this fight, and Chewie's grabbing him and slamming him around. And then eventually Chewie gets his hands on his neck and just, like, slams him into the mud and is just, like, choking the life out of him. And in that moment, Han kind of, my terrible Wookiee impersonation, but he like speaks the language Shriwook, and there ends up being subtitles for it, which that's the thing I was kind of annoyed by. It's obviously throughout all the Star Wars movies, you know that Han understands Chewie, but we've never heard him actually speak the language. And again, this is really nitpicky to even complain about this, but it was just something that I feel like they could have done without. Like, they didn't have to actually have Han speak the language, because clearly Chewbacca can understand what he's saying. But then again, maybe Han didn't know that. Like, in that moment, Han maybe didn't understand that, oh, this thing doesn't understand, like, the standard language that I'm speaking. So again, it's kind of a nitpicky little point, but I just feel like it could have been a little better for Han just to say, I understand, let's work this out. But anyway, so the movie was good. I liked it. Like, just looking at the movie for what it is, I thought it was fun, entertaining, and it did what it was supposed to do. I mean, it's not supposed to be some, you know, Oscar Best Picture winning movie that has the best drama and all. You know, it's a Star Wars movie, and it's supposed to be fun, and it's supposed to, like, flesh out a little bit more of these characters that we've grown up with. And I don't think they did anything to ruin what you would think of Han Solo or Lando or Chewbacca in these movies. So, you know, like I said, I still stand by my opinion that I really like it, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. So if you want to leave your thoughts in the comment section down below, that'd be great. And as always, if you want to hear more content, please subscribe down below, and I'll see you next time.